Hey there everyone, Mazrock here, and today I am going to tell you how I learned how to keep my players more invested into the campaign and how to hook them a lot more with modules or homebrew stories. Let's go. All right, hooking your players with a good narrative or story. So, first we need to begin with acknowledging one crucial fact. People are selfish. We all are. And what I mean there is, when something's not about you, you start to lose interest. We all do. And it's kind of natural. I'm not saying that, everyone at your table is a terrible person for being selfish. That's not it at all. What I'm trying to say is, as a DM, especially creating a homebrew world, we spend a lot of time on past lore, events going on in the world, and things like that. But those aren't all narrative hooks. Those are past stories. And what I mean is, your players at the table are interested in what they are currently doing, the story they are currently writing. Because I've said this in past videos and I'll say it again. You as the DM are writing chapter titles. You have no idea what order those chapter titles are going to come into play, are going to resolve or conclude, or what's in them. Because your players are going to take the title and the beginning paragraph that you've kind of started, and they are going to completely run with it. And one thing I've learned as a DM is, whatever you have planned, there's a very, very, very solid chance that's going right out the window. Someone is going to come up with an unexpected plan, is going to completely 180. There are so many things that can happen in the course of a session with a game like this, where it's very difficult to plan. So this is where I kind of like to have this framework of, okay, block A, block B, block B, C, which way are they going to go, and work with it from there, and completely be willing to change the narrative. But that's not what this is about. So, I think I read a stat. It's something like 83% of all the work that a dungeon master does for prep and games never sees the light of day. So when you're spending that time building your world, building your lore, building the capitals, building the populations, building everything, I'm not saying don't do that. I have a lot of fun doing that. I still do it, although it very, very rarely comes up in some of my games. In some games, it comes up a lot more frequently. It all depends who's at the player and who's at the table and how they're feeling. Because maybe someone's feeling a little down that night. They don't want to ask as many questions, and that might have been the person that could have turned that key to unlock a big door. So I personally love doing it, and if you love doing it, please, I encourage you to do it too. But that is it's unrelated to what the characters are doing now, and this is what I mean by selfish. A barbarian at the table does not care about a war that was fought 1,000 years ago. They care about the war that's being fought now. Where can they swing the sword? A wizard cares not about a spell that was created 1,000 years ago that they've mastered or that they could possibly learn down the line. They care about learning the new schools of magic or, new studies, advancement forward, what pertains to them. And that's just various typical views of two different classes. So when at the table, you need to find a way to turn the narrative onto the players and make it about their characters. And the easiest and best way I found to do this is have them write a backstory and not just a paragraph of, oh, he was here, oh, he did this, oh, she did this, and this is that. Have them write out an actual backstory with events that occurred and not just relevant events. Perhaps it was something in their childhood that they liked, a fond moment with a sibling, or kind of the development of a rivalry. And there are a million ways and ton of resources that you can give your players to help them write out a longer backstory. And I'm not saying it needs to be a novel. It doesn't. One of my players recently just sent me, I think it was a 13-page backstory. And I mean, I had my coffee that morning, I read it, and I was entranced, and I seen the possibilities that I can work with as a DM, and there's a lot of them. And that's one player out of 4. So when you start getting these backstories, you can start working with them, making it about them. So what I do then is, so I have my campaign idea in mind. I have point A to point B kind of set. This is how I want to end it. This is kind of my big bad. How they're going to get from point A to point B is entirely reliant on them, with a few benchmarks that I can put in, a few check marks that I can put in the middle for things that I want to see happen. But the thing is one thing I never do is I want to see X thing happen at this location at this time, because there is this very, very small percentage of a chance that that is actually going to occur. I often change timing and placing of things that I want to see happen, because this is a good moment for it. This is a good spot in the narrative for it. Where I thought they might be at one corner of the country or the nation or the continent, I'll take that and apply it to the other end. Now this will mean having to change maybe NPC races, enemy races, or things like that, but these are all things that you can do. You're in control of the driver's seat here, and it doesn't matter whether you're running a module or not. So you need to be a little bit flexible on there, but take their backstories, work with the backstories, and apply it to your campaign. If it's a homebrew campaign and you had an NPC in mind and you really like this NPC and you want to keep him, but he's not relevant to any character, maybe take that NPC, go through your character's backstories and be like, this guy here in this person's backstory, this would be a perfect time for him to come up, and that is now this person that I had in mind. Could be a good guy, could be a bad guy, doesn't matter. You can change it however you want. But by doing that, and the moment that player hears that NPC name from their backstory, I don't care if they're on their phone. I really don't. They will be like this, maybe at the table. They'll hear that name and they'll be like, I've seen it happen all of the time. Because now you've taken something of theirs that they wrote, that they create, and you've implied them in it and their character in it. You will have their attention. Even if it is the type of player that just likes to, spend all their time in combat and never likes to roleplay. The moment you have them write out that backstory with names and NPCs and things like that, now they don't need to fully create backstories for their NPCs, but just have them give them a name and a race. And, kind of what they meant to them. It's a sentence. It's really like a sentence long is all you need. But with that, you can really move the narrative forward and put the ownership and the agency on them. And that is kind of the last point in all this, and the purpose is when they create the backstories and you work it and you throw it back out at them, the agency is now on them. And rarely have I seen players not take that agency and have a blast with it. You can intermingle character backstories too without them knowing. And when some of your players at the table, realize that they now have a connection through their backstory that they didn't know about before and they discovered it, it's a joyous moment for them. It's all those wheels turning. And when players are given that agency, they are now invested. And it's agency that they created. The only thing you did is they gave you a plate of ingredients. You cooked the meal and seasoned it and said, here you go. And then now it's up to them to eat it and run with it. And this works. I have seen it happen all of the time. But the main key thing here is to have your players write out backstories. Even the ones that say, I don't really like backstories. Have them write it out. And if they don't write it out, ask them. And if they don't write a long one, ask them questions about it. Say, hey, I noticed that you didn't write a long backstory. Do you mind if I take what you wrote and expand on it for you? See if there's something that goes on. If there's this happened when I was young. Okay, just write a little blurb about it. Does this work for you? And then suddenly they're going to start talking about it. They're going to start thinking about it. And they might, some people do feel bad when the DMs writing their backstories for them, then they'll start writing it more themselves. But when you do that and you work with it and you give it back to them, this is an instant hook for the players. That it works every time. That's the longest and the biggest one. The other one that I find, now this is more for your combat-oriented players, is surprise them. One thing I do, and this I did it in the home game just the other night. They sailed off to sea. They're heading north to go get it. That's a very long background setup for what I'm about to say. Whatever, they're on the sea, they're going north. That's all you need to know. I had a deep fog roll in on their ship, so they slowed down, and all of a sudden a ghost ship starts kind of cruising towards them. Now they managed to. This was never about the impact. It hurt the ship a little bit, but it was never about the impact. The ship was abandoned. When they finally get down to one of the lowest levels of the ship, there are new barrels of gunpowder, like everywhere. When investigating this gunpowder, one of their like nemesis, or like this faction that they're against, and they've been butting heads, comes out of the back one and lights a torch and starts blowing up the ship. Fun encounter, not bad. They have this chance of combat. Things obviously fail. He had multiple means of blowing up the ship. Suddenly they realize that they shouldn't be on the ship a couple rounds later, but that's... players do what players do. When they came up, the explosion was actually the signal. It wasn't meant to destroy the ship, just hurt it, but the explosion was the signal for a juvenile kraken to come up and attack the ship. They were nowhere near high enough level to deal with a kraken. They weren't. And that's the surprise. You can tune high level things down. You can tune low level things up. But and I find this is kind of a complacency among players that have played, especially 5e, for a long time. Oh, we're CR2, we're going to face goblins. Oh, we're level 5, we're going to face this range of enemies. But when you take all of the monsters in every book and you just say, these are now the options that you can fight. All of the options that you can fight, that might come after you. That is an instant hook for combat type players, because they're no longer facing the same things at the same levels that they had in the last 3 campaigns. It's different. And that, combat-oriented players tend to gravitate towards that a lot, and I had some comments on that. They're like, level 6 and we're fighting a juvenile kraken? Yes, I nerfed the damn thing. I mean, they are all pretty hard-hitting things, so I didn't nerf its HP a lot, but I nerfed how hard it hit. I nerfed some of its things, but I also changed the combat around. What I did is I gave the tentacles each 40 HP, and all of the damage done to a tentacle deals half damage to the main body. So even though they're dealing with tentacles and things like that, they're also finding easy ways to deal with the Kraken itself as the HP kind of starts piling down. Now, again, my party there is a very high damaging party. They have ways of dealing 140, 130 HP damage in a round. It is very, very possible for them to do. So if I say I didn't nerf the HP that much, that's kind of why. Now, they can also get hit very hard and kind of... it's a fine balance. But surprise your players with monsters. Don't think you have to follow the CR rules, because your players that have played in multiple campaigns, they expect this, and when you give them this for combat... it's an overjoyous moment for them, and they left that session. They were really like, man, we defeated this Kraken, like, oh my god. I mean, the thing that summoned it's still after you, but that's something else to think about. So those are 2 of the ways that I really do try and implement, and this goes back to planning. And don't be afraid to ask for a backstory after a campaign started either. Like, work with your players on that. Maybe it's something that they weren't as interested in writing out before the campaign, but as it goes on, they're starting to realize more about their character, and, they might want to add a past event or things like that. I am completely okay with any player adding more to their backstory as the campaign goes on, because they might not have thought of something, or they might not have realized what kind of campaign it is, what kind of world it is, and I find with homebrew worlds, homebrew settings, that can be difficult, because the players don't always know what to expect going into a new homebrew world. When it's something like a 5e module, this is set in Forgotten Realms. This is set in Eberron. It's a little bit easier to base it off geography, nationalities, and things like that, because it's a ton of lore that's been around for a long time. So, but homebrew worlds, especially me, I have a hard time coming up with backstories. Not hard time coming up. I have a hard time coming up with detailed backstories for a homebrew world that I've never been in, because it's difficult. You don't have all the information at your hands. So work with your players, give them the agency by letting them create. Just because it's your homebrew world doesn't mean they can't create things. In the current home game, I let everyone know, like, all right, so you guys have agency here. Yes, it's a homebrew setting, it's in Forgotten Realms. This is a part of the world that's never been touched before. So gods, pantheons, things like that. But I mean, if you want to be from a specific weird town that has, a frog mayor, I don't care. It's not something they chose, but you know what I mean? I don't care. Create it. I will find a place for it in the homebrew world. So that gave them more agency. So now they have more reason to maybe go back to town, things like that. It's things that they created, but when they create these things and they create these players and they create these moments in the world, they get hooked. They get invested. And that's the key, is working together. Okay? You're the creator of all of this, yes, but they're the ones with pens too. They're the ones also writing. They're editing. They're completely ripping things out that you might have planned. Work with them, give them agency. Now, I know this has been kind of a long video, so I'll kind of go off that. I really hope some of these things helped. As you can tell, I've had quite a few thoughts on this for a fairly long time, but those are the things that I try and keep in mind whenever I'm running a campaign, preparing a campaign, and moving forward, and trying to keep people hooked and off the phones as much as possible. I stream on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Go below and check out my schedule on Twitch. They are at varying times. As well, we do run Rime of the Frostmaiden actual play. It's been both silly and horrifying all at the same time every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. And I am writing the recap, so if you would like to go into the next session knowing what's going on, the recaps are on Patreon, usually within 4 or 5 days of the last one, and they're not super long reads. Each one's not a novel. I have a character's backstory that is still longer than all of my recaps, so you're good. Patreon's down below if you'd like some printable spell effects for your table, other DM resources, combat trackers, go check that out. As well, if you would like to buy dice bags, masks, Halloween stuff, Christmas stuff, Etsy's down below, check that out. It all goes towards helping a stay-at-home dad stay at home with his kids more. I want to thank everybody for the continued support that we've gotten on this channel so far. It has really come to grow. Twitch as well. Everybody's huge thank you. Let's keep those numbers going up and just seeing a nice community grow around inclusiveness and just good vibes all around the love that we have for gaming, D&D, and everything else. Aside from that, I hope your next session's a fantastic one, and we'll see you next week.